Welcome back to the No Stopping Kev Show. 2020 has been one heck of a year. It started with the COVID-19 pandemic, but the recent events of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks, and unfortunately so many more has led to the long overdue uprising. We saw people marching in the streets of about 18 different countries chanting Black Lives Matter. Something that I don't understand is how those words can be met with so much opposition. Yes, people that actually want to stand up and say Black lives don't matter, or they don't matter as much as all lives or white lives or blue lives. In all of this, something that stands out to me is the dichotomy between being black and being a member of law enforcement. But we know that there are black people who are members of law enforcement that are seemingly stuck in the middle. I was fortunate to have the opportunity to take some time to sit down and talk to a father-son duo who are both members of law enforcement. It was very enlightening having a conversation to get their perspective on things, because I feel it's a perspective that oftentimes we do not hear. If you're listening on your favorite podcast app, be sure to leave us a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, please be sure to give us a thumbs up, click that subscribe button, and also click that bell. As always, your support is greatly appreciated. I hope you enjoy this episode. All right, welcome back to the No Stopping Kev Show. I'm here with some very special guests, Scott Sr. and Jr., two people that are near and dear to my heart. They serve for their respective police forces, but today's all about getting that perspective from some of our members of law enforcement that are black. You know, first and foremost, thank you both for being here. It means a lot for taking time out of your day to do this for me. And also, thank you for, what you both do in your respective communities.
No doubt, Kev. No doubt. It's a pleasure to be on here, my man.
Oh, man. Appreciate it. Can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up, what that experience was like?
Well, peace, everybody. My name is Maurice Scott. I am the creator of Maurice Scott Jr., who I'm very proud of, but a little bit about myself. I'm actually born and raised for a decent part in Brooklyn, New York, in the west part of Brooklyn called Bensonhurst, where, I had a large family. I was living with my grandfather and my grandmother, along with my mother and my aunts and uncles. So we had a pretty big, large family in a small space. On the block that I lived in was not too many black families. In fact, it was a predominantly Italian neighborhood where a lot of the Italian mafia lived. A lot of those mafia figures that we see in the movies and that y'all hear in the rap, whatnot, John Gotti and all them type guys, that's the guys we kind of lived around. It was not a good space for black people. If you listen to a rap song by, Public Enemy, they talk about one particular gentleman that came to our neighborhood who was black, Mr. Hawkins, who wanted to purchase a vehicle. When he came to the predominantly white neighborhood, he was actually killed by a white mob, and Al Sharpton was actually marching up the street from where we lived at. And it was kind of like, it was kind of interesting because we have been experienced the racism growing up in Brooklyn, in Bensonhurst, every single day, going to school, in that neighborhood, being called, all kinds of racial slurs, niggers, we was attacked. Didn't matter whether it was myself or my brother or, the women in our family. Every day we had to, kind of move out, not alone, but with, a partner, just so we can ensure our safety within the neighborhood. So we had to endure a lot of that. And it's safe to say that some of my friends at the time, good friends, actually was white. I think that was because we didn't have any other black people around us. So there was actually some white folks that, we were actually, pretty cool with. So it wasn't all bad, but for the most part, the bigger picture or the largest picture, we had to endure like racism, white supremacy everywhere we went. Until I moved to Philadelphia when I trained out about 13 years old. When I moved here into a predominantly black, town called Chocolate City, because we're about 45% black now. Um, I found myself being happy and overjoyed to be raised among folks that look like me. I never had an opportunity to go to school with folks that look like me, black African people. But what I found out is through that, there was a struggle that came along with it. And I found myself at times fighting folks that look like me. I'm like, man, we look the same, we from the same, you know what I'm saying? And then to have to fight my own people, it made me upset. It was a difference between fighting the white folks and fighting the black folks, because fighting white people there, it was like, it made me angry because I knew they hated us. When I came to Philadelphia, it was very different. It was like, I was fighting, but it was more or less like a snap, like something happened and people get, aggressive for that moment. You know what I'm saying? It was just like, you fought that person, you might fight a couple of their friends, and then sometimes, a lot of times, y'all cool after that. You know what I'm saying? Or they stayed on their side and we stayed on our side. And that was it. In those times, it made me more sad fighting my own people versus it making me angry, because I knew it was something other than we hating each other that deeply as white folks hated us in Brooklyn and Benson.
One thing that I've learned, and with everything that's been going on recently, I've been having a lot more discussions with different people. And when I talk to my parents, their experience is a lot different than mine. My experiences are a lot different than my peers who grew up in predominantly white neighborhoods. Like for me, I feel like the only time, like in school here and there, you have like white kids that would say the N word, but it's just it's more so out of that jokingness, just because they can get away with it. The only time I felt like someone sort of meant it was I was in a Boston market with my mom in South Philly. And it was like these younger girls, they all were probably like sisters or cousins. But one was young, like probably like 6 or 7. And she was there with her older cousins who probably were 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there. But she tried to disguise the way she was saying it, like nigger. And I was just like, I was young also, so I didn't really know how to respond. And I told my mom when I got to the car, and she was just like, why didn't you tell me when we were in there? But then looking back, I was like, it's probably good I didn't tell you, because God only knows what would have happened.
Right.
But recently I'm talking to some of my peers that have grown up in white spaces. And the amount of times that people have called them that, even if it's playful back and forth with your teammates, for people to say that, I'm just like, wow, you've had to endure a lot more pain than I have. So it's been very eye-opening for me. Lil Mo, I know your experience probably has been a bit different growing up in a different environment. What was it like for you?
We another generation. Like it wasn't, or it doesn't seem as blatant as where my dad grew up at. Predominantly black school. I mean, white was the minority within and African Americans were the majority. Specifically, my school, Parkway Center City. But when I got to college, that's when it kind of shifted a lot. It was almost like a culture shock, just because, I mean, I go from, if you see a white kid in school, in high school, you're just like, oh man, like, where is he from? Like it is a form, but then the roles switch when you go to college. And I know when you went to UPenn, so I know there was the same thing for you. And for me, my school was, I think, like 95 to 96% white, and I was African Americans were a very small majority there. So it was like I said, it was a different different feel. Like a lot of kids come from like the suburban area where there's not a lot of African Americans in particular. So using the N word is like a fad to them. Like It's like it's like it means you're hip and nobody's there to check them. I think college kind of shifted my thoughts on that, just because it was like I wasn't used to seeing that. So I'm like, what you doing? Like, why are you saying that? And it's almost like they knew, like they would look at you first and kind of like hesitate, but then say it anyway. So it's like you serious, but like I said, I think it's just one of those cultural things, and just want to be down. And I'm like, let's be real here, like Black culture, a lot of people want to be down with that. So I think that was just more so where that came from. My dad, he like, that man has experienced a lot, 10 times more than what I've experienced in my face. But I mean, there's, like just subtle things. Like I know there was a big thing and a big controversy at Arcadia University with their sports teams. And it's actually starting to come out. And I know like the baseball team would go up there for their initiation because frats and sororities weren't allowed on my campus. It was Greek life free. So a lot of the kids for their initiations, they would go up. One of their challenges was to go up to Black people and say Happy Martin Luther King Day, like little stuff like that. Yeah. Like, and that was like in their rules, like, and it like every year, because I saw some people that were even after my year, like younger than me, saying the same thing. And I'm just like, dang, they still kept that going even after I graduated? Like, that's crazy. And for it to be continuously going, it goes to show, like, either people just didn't want to say anything because we were a very, very small percentage of that population. I don't know. But I mean, I'm glad it's coming out now. There was another instance where I was, when I went overseas to Australia, I was on the netball team, and we were like in a championship game. And I guess over there, they thought, one of the guys thought it was funny to say, hey, because my shoes, I had the Kevin Durant's, the Christmas edition joints. So the red and gold. And he was like, hey, yo, your shoes look like it looked like watermelon. You like to eat watermelon, right? And they like yelled at, and that ticked me off. It ticked me off like crazy. But a lot of people was like, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with the watermelon? Like, but people don't understand where, that come from overseas. So I think it was real interesting to see almost how the outside world looking in kind of sees this, as a joke, because it's just ignorance. They just don't understand how deep rooted it can go. And those are like the two instances where it was like really in my face growing up until this point. So
yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with our generation, and especially with our white peers thinking it's like a fad, like it's a hip thing. Like, it's funny how our memory works, because as you hear certain things come back to mind. But like, I remember being on a work trip, and this one dude, because he was associated with Black people that would let him say it, he thought it was acceptable. Their ignorance to the word, only passed it over to him. So he thought it was something that was okay. And it was one of those things where the first time he said it, I wasn't sure if I heard him right. Like, I was just like, all right, I'm gonna just assume he didn't say it. Then he said it again, and like you said, it's like that hesitation, but it's like, all right, I'm gonna go for it again. And then I had to check him right then and there. And it only, like, other incidents happen, but you just gotta have those conversations with people because they really have no idea. But thank you both for sharing about those experiences. I think it's very important. And it's just also just kind of to see, where people come from and what the types of things that they had to go through. What made each of you decide to, pursue a career in law enforcement?
I'll let the old head start first.
All right, man, you get a pass because that's my boy. I'm gonna be just straight. I mean, honest. That's what we being honest, right? I didn't want to be in law enforcement at all growing up. When I moved from New York to Philadelphia, I was sent here. I was sent here because I was living with my mother, and I truly believe that my mother felt it was time for me to move with my dad because I was becoming a man. Not only that, I had other family members who lived in New York who were not always, doing, the right things all the time. Although we was a family, very loving, my uncles, unfortunately, in the early years, were actually getting into trouble and getting incarcerated, things of that nature. And also had some cousins around my age, that was dibbling dabbling. Not everyone, but that was an open field for me to perhaps get engaged in some activities that would be detrimental to me. And I was actually getting in a little trouble in school. So you know the story. I had to move over, here to Philadelphia. And so as I grew up, man, I got a little, I went to school, was doing okay, up and down in school, getting, in trouble from time to time, not necessarily fighting, but being a little mischievous, wasn't always doing my work. Moved with my dad, but my dad was, kind of doing his thing. So I was like, hey, that's open season for me to do my thing. You know what I'm saying? That's what we're supposed to do. You're a teenager, right? Supposed to live it up and have, live your life. So in doing that, I kind of like was hanging around the wrong people. Wasn't necessarily doing the things that I was supposed to do. And in fact, got involved with groups of people that were doing things contrary to what I do now, right? As a police officer. The mere fact that I didn't get caught up is actually a miracle, right? And so I never really thought about being a police officer. I just didn't want to go to school after I graduated and perhaps, get involved or maybe go deeper into the street, right? And I thought I had it all figured out. I said, I can go on the street. I won't get caught. I just do what do whatever I want. So, that kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? I just couldn't wait. But I had another young man that was around my age. He's actually a little bit older than me, about 10 months older than me, who I always looked up to. And that's my brother. We were like the odd couple. He would do everything right, and I would do just the opposite. But at the same time, when he got in trouble, I wanted to make sure that he didn't get in that much trouble because I knew I could take the pain and the punishment because he was just so right. You know what I'm saying? So he kept on that path, but so right that ultimately he became a police officer, right? And I always looked up to him. So when I started to get in trouble here in Philly, and I felt like if I didn't change my life, I would end up either dead or incarcerated. It was the Creator allowed me to make a very decision to change my life. And because I looked up to my brother, like I still do, I made that decision to not only go into the military as he did, but I made the decision to become a police officer. And I can tell you the real decent story. I wanted to save everybody. I wanted to help the community. I can tell you that. You know what I'm saying? I always was a decent dude. You understand what I'm saying? I always was helping people out in the community. You know what I'm saying? People love me. I love them. You understand what I'm saying? No matter what I was doing, people had that love because I was real. At the same time, I was looking out for people, right? Mm-hmm. Just like I looked out for you, nephew. Same thing, it never changed. It was always there. But I just was on wasn't too much on the good side. But when I made that decision to change over, I was able to still be me, but do it the right way. And as a result of that, I believe the department benefited from the way I was raised, from the way I am, right? And so I benefited from that because I was able to use the tools the police department afforded me without me putting money in my pocket to give back to the community. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So that's it, and it kept me going. It really kept me going. And knowing that I was in a predominantly Black city, I was able to, what I was thinking in the beginning, was able to show love to my people, right? And take care and look out for my people in the uniform. I didn't go to war, with my community because that's the community I came from.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? If I go to war with them, then I'm going to war with myself. That don't make sense. I go to the same Applebee's. I sit on the same toilets at the McDonald's, you know what I'm saying, sitting and hang that the community I'm supposed to, patrol, protect and serve. I still do that within my community, and I'm aware of that, and I'm in touch with that. So that made me even more powerful that I could help my people in this capacity to the point where people don't like what I do. You understand what I'm saying? But still have that love going back and forth, and I'm still able to show love, and they still able to accept me in the uniform. That was the benefit. You can't put a price on that. So that just kept me going.
Young fella. What about you?
Young stud.
Well, it's different. It's a little different. And as I listen to my dad's story, like it's passing things on a generation to generation is definitely important, especially, you know, in our culture is very important to pass on things you've learned in order to build. That's how, you know, growth happens. But I'll start off, like, I knew going through high school and college, like, I knew I wanted to be of some service to somebody. Wasn't sure if it was law enforcement. Like, that wasn't my initial thought. I just,
Not mine either.
yeah, yeah, and it's crazy how we just end up there. But
Yeah.
one of the first thoughts was the military, and then things happened. I mean, I went to the Naval Academy and everything, but it's almost like God kind of shifted me to another. He closed one door just to open another. It's almost like each step I took, I needed to learn a lesson for, you know, what my purpose really was. It led me up until it led me to be a police officer. Like, when I started applying for jobs my senior year, and I was just looking at different things and looking at different job titles and different job descriptions, I didn't really see, like, the only thing that came out was law enforcement. Like, that description really stuck out to me, and it was something that I knew long term that I would be doing for the rest of my life, that I could do for the rest of my life. As I'm reading this description about protecting and serving, as, you know, the mantra of law enforcement, or supposed to be, I thought about my dad and thought about all the stuff he's done, and he's being modest, but to serve in a community where, like like Philadelphia, I don't know, in the early 2000s, I don't know if you know, but like, it was in the running for the murder capital of the country. And my dad was working in the 22nd district, which had the most murders in the city and the most violent crime. So it's just like, this dude was, what you see on TV is what he was doing. But not only was he doing that, I would come to the station, and it'll scare me a little bit, but the way that the community reacted to him, the way that he could just walk down and people wave at him, the way, you know, you go into a lot of these neighborhoods, 23rd and Dime and all in the heart of North Philly, and the fact that people know him and shake his hand. And there was one time, now I'll never forget, I believe we were at a gas station, and I think somebody came up to talk to him and say what's up. And then once we left, I was like, "Hey, Dad, who was that?" And he told me it was somebody that he locked up. And I'm just like, what? This, my dad is in plain clothes, just chilling. And a guy came up, shake his hand, and it was nothing but love. So it's like, when you look at today's image of police, it's just like, it's like police against the community. But, you know, when I know that my dad has been that role model, that model of what a police officer should be, because he chased the worst of the worst in Philadelphia. He's fought with the worst of the worst in Philadelphia, but he's also bridged. He also was part of the community. He did both. He's the prime example of that connection that we're supposed to have, to take care of the bullies in the city, but also take care of that community. And you can't have one without the other. So that was just one of the things that, you know, kind of led me to following those footsteps, to see, you know, what I can do. And of course, I'm not in Philadelphia. I decided to come over to the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia, if nobody knew. And I just decided to kind of, you know, make my own like lane and my own, I guess, my own name for myself, but following that footprint that my dad set. And, you know, I've been going from there with that.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Like, I would have never guessed that. And I feel like I've never, like, I don't know of any other examples of when, you know, a son follows in his father's footsteps in, you know, a career like being a police officer. Like, we all know how dangerous it can be. But when you explain, you know, the things you saw, like the community aspect, like being, you know, someone that's impacting the lives of, you know, everyday people in the community, it makes perfect sense. And I think that that's what we need to get more of. More officers that are kind of committed to having a real relationship with the community rather than just being an authority figure. I think we'll have a much different narrative. Generally, like, what's your thoughts on everything that's going on in regards to police brutality?
So my thoughts on it. I mean, we all saw the video of George Floyd, and you know that like every police officer that I've spoken to, everybody that I work alongside, have denounced what happened to George Floyd. That's not something that we train in, but it's and and it go like I see videos all the time, and we're putting, and this is going to be tough, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be like, I know that, but you have to look, you kind of have to. With me, I want to know everything that's happened. With the George Floyd situation, that's kind of an anomaly because once the handcuffs go on, that's it. In the fight's over. It's done. It's over with. So that point where he wasn't in the whole video, he was sitting there and everybody's seen it. So that point where the handcuffs go on, it's over. It's said and done. So there's no ands or buts about that. But for me, there's a lot of things that can be construed, especially with the media, because you'll see one clip of something, but you don't see what happened before, or you don't see what happened after. And I think that it does a disservice, and I hope that police departments can be more transparent. And if the media is showing this one part, how about you show what happened before that? Because when the media is putting that one specific clip there, it only gives one perspective, and it does, like what people see. Of course, people are going to say, yeah, that's brutality. That's what happened, and that's it. And I'm not making an excuse for anybody. Like I said, I've been put in a position to where I need to look at it from start to finish, because I've been in situations where I've had to wrestle and fight with people. I've been in situations to where I've had to use force. That's part of the job. But at the end of the day, it's all about what happened, what occurred. And a lot like the Breonna Taylor thing, that's a major mess up. And I mean, I don't even know what to say with that. But it's like I said, it's hard because of the climate we're in. And like you said in the beginning of this, it's almost like we got to choose sides, quote unquote. But like I try to be as transparent, and with people who know me personally, like they know that I'm not going to let something rock if I know it's not right. I'm not going to sit here and let somebody say, oh, Black people are more violent and we need to be heavily in their neighborhood. Like, no, like that ain't gonna work. And people know not to say nothing crazy like that in front of me. That's just how it is. And that's just, how I roll. And my dad told me that's, you need to watch out. You need to, be careful and watch what people say. And I'm not going to say that these thoughts aren't in people's heads, because I've had to look at people sideways. Like, I mean, I'm not going to, sugarcoat it. Like I'm not. And a lot of these people, specifically white cops, need to be educated and culturally educated about just the communities they serve, not just the African American community, even though that, that's what's the headlines right now. But if they're serving in a community, if they're serving in a Hispanic community, an Asian community, you should know the culture. You should know what's in their eyes, like what's right, what's wrong, what they value. Like you should know all these things and what their upbringing, where did it come from. I shared a story on my social media about when on 4th of July, 2014? I believe it's 2014. I was hanging out in Love Park, hanging with my friends and everything. And then all of a sudden, somebody lights a firecracker off. And boom, everybody scatters. But I moved away, of course, because it kind of scared me because I didn't know what it was. But I dropped my glasses. So I went to get my glasses. And next thing you know, I see a white Philadelphia police officer get off his bike, doesn't say a word to me, throws me to the ground. The right side of my body was scraped up. My glasses were broke, put me in handcuffs. And he just assumed that I set off the firecracker because I ran away and was laughing, which, I mean, you don't just throw somebody to the ground for, no reason. That like he didn't say anything to me, no commands, nothing. So as a police, I knew it was wrong because first off, my dad's a police officer. Second off, I was also an explorer. So I'm just like, what in the world? But now that I'm actually living as a certified police officer, I'm like, yo, that was like absolutely terrible. Like that was ridiculous. For him to have me throw me to the ground, not say anything to me, just to assume, and then, have an attitude with me. And then after like 10 minutes, let me go. And I'm sure he didn't do a report for that. I'm sure he didn't. So I'm like, that wouldn't, where I'm at, that wouldn't fly at all. So I know that was wrong. So I'm 100% like it's alive and well. Like that, it's not a myth. It's not something that, people are just pulling out their behinds. It happens because it happened to me. But I think the one thing that, and, I'm very privileged and blessed to have is my dad, who was a police officer. So, I never know what if my dad wasn't a police officer and that happened to me? Would I have hated cops? I always think about that. Like, would I have had the same sentiment? I mean, it always felt growing up that I was always like a little side-eye with cops, even with my dad a cop. But imagine if I didn't know the good side of police officers. So I see where people are coming from. It's one of those things. We need to have a real conversation, and a lot of these. And I've seen with a lot of meetings. I've had a couple meetings with my chief of police about what's going on today, and a lot of the things that I'm saying is law enforcement. Even though when somebody in Minneapolis does something, we're all wrong, but I think there needs to be a unified front when it comes to a lot of our policies, because they're not. And I don't think a lot of people know that. They think that law enforcement has a strict standard across the board, but that's not the case. There's different policies for different places. Some places like the Minneapolis use of force policy, I heard was 8 years old. I heard they didn't change it in the past 8 years. A lot of people don't know that what he did to George Floyd, we can't do that. That's against our policy. Chokeholds, that was against our policy. A lot of these things that people are asking for change is already that's already in my policy where I'm at. So it's just real interesting. And I mean, I don't want to say that not all cops are bad, because that's an argument that a lot of people are kind of like snickering about. But I think as law enforcement, we need to come up with a way to be on an even playing field, and with these different types of policies that people are calling for, because a lot of departments, and I'll say a lot of progressive departments are already have these policies, but a lot of departments that are smaller, where a lot of these things are happening, it's unacceptable, and it's making us all look bad at the end of the day. So I think that this whole police brutality opens the eyes of whoever governs the law enforcement across the United States.
I know it probably varies place to place, but I didn't realize how. Like for me, I would have just assumed that everybody was still using chokeholds, right? And it's not until you hear on the news like, oh, these 7 places are now banning chokeholds, and it's like, all right, well, that should have been happened when Eric Gardner was spitting a chokehold. But to hear you say that, your department, that's already in your policy, everybody else needs to catch up. So it's great hearing your perspective on it, because, I mean, wow, that just opened my eyes to a lot of different things, especially like you said, like people need to look at the whole story, see the whole video, like not just take 10 seconds and let that be it. Like, don't base your opinion on 10 seconds. Like, I know for me personally, I try to, before I make an opinion or a statement on anything, I'll tell you in a minute. Let me do some more digging, and I'll get back. Like with the Rayshard Brooks one, I saw, the short clip of when he was running away, shots fired, he goes to the ground. But then I actually took and I watched the entire 43-minute video, because I was like, I need to see what happened start to finish. Like, just trying to benefit of doubt, be as objective as I can be. And that one, dude, that one hurt. Like I just broke into tears. And it really, Like, I don't think so. Me and Rayshard both have January 31st birthdays. I don't think I'll ever forget anything from that video, just because I'm like, yo, like it hit home. For some reason, that little connection just hit home, and when you see it start to finish, like, was the most polite person you could be. And so that was a big loss. And then you have Ahmaud Arbery.
Right. And that wasn't even, that wasn't even a cop. And I will go to bat with that when that day that happened, I went to my school. I'm like, yo, we wouldn't even do this as a police officer. So how, like, the whole way they operated with that, like that wouldn't fly. That wouldn't fly here. It just wouldn't. And I don't know if you know, but I also had training in Glencoe County. I was down there for about 4 months. So I know that area, and it's a little sketchy. I'll tell you that right now. Like, and I don't want to say I'm not surprised, but I'm just like that. That gave me the type of vibe when I was there, and I felt like I was getting side looks and everything like that. So I mean, that just played a little part. But just watching that video and watching these two guys just chase him down, that whole interaction, and for the guy to be ex law enforcement. He should know, why are you bringing a gun to, first of all, a shotgun up close in person to a person like that you believe is a threat. Like, you won't get that close to somebody you think is a threat. And then from Ahmaud's perspective, like, if somebody, came up to me with a shotgun like that, regardless of, what I was doing, like, I mean, I saw the video with, him in a construction zone or whatever. And in high school, I did that. Mm-hmm. There's no excuse for you to try to chase down somebody. Like, come on. Okay. Right. Like, seriously, a life because somebody was in a house, in a construction, in a halfway built house or whatever. Like, then it's just mind boggling to me. It is very mind-boggling to me, and one of those things to where I don't know what their policy is in Glencoe County for their police department, but if somebody's calling a burglary or somebody is saying they was inside of a house or trespassing and taking stuff, we're hauling behind to get there, but the response time is short. You can, by all means, follow him. You see, he was running away. It wasn't even like he was turning around to attack him. He was running away. So if he was running like that, so just follow him. If that's what you feared, that's what you believe what was happening, you wanted to catch this guy, all you had to do, this dude literally was slowing down. Just follow him and be at a safe distance and then wait for police to get there. But that wasn't the case. They wanted to take matters in their own hands, and that's why they're in the position that they're in, because they thought that, it honestly looked like they were hunting him. Like I was watching like something on Animal Planet. Like that's how triggering it was. That's just my take on that.
Can you help me understand, and I know this can vary from location to location, but when is it okay to go from de-escalation mode to potentially semi-lethal and lethal force mode?
Matt, Mo, you want it? Mo's pretty good on that, Mo. You got it.
Yeah. Well, and it's crazy. It's funny you say that because I'm like I mean, just my first year on, I've had all the way up. I mean, I've never shot anybody, thank God, but I've had to go all the way up to drawing my firearm. A lot of people will call me too patient. It's all circumstantial, but there's, and it'll be so hard to explain like a step by step, just because you're like you said, it varies. But I can explain certain situations that I've had, to where I've had to, use force. I mean, I had a situation where I was in a town center, and there was a guy, I don't know if he was on drugs or drunk, but there was a van and he was literally punching the windows out of the van with his bare fist. His blood was everywhere. And then he sat inside the van, and that's when I rolled up. And we're, there's like maybe 4 or 5 officers on scene, and we're trying to, talk him out. We're trying to figure out like what's wrong with him. He's bleeding. And, at that point we get EMS and everything because we see the blood, and we have them standing by, and he's just very, you can tell there's something, like he's not responding to us. Like this isn't a normal thing. And we try to get him out. We try to talk him down, and this is all spending in like 10, 15 minutes. We're just really trying to get him out. But after a certain point, we have to, like, this is a safety risk for the individual. So somehow we were able to talk him out of the van, but he started to, when we tried to get him into handcuffs, he started to swing and got back in the van. So at that point we knew that he was going to be aggressive. He was going to, like, he had no problem swinging on us. And at that point, we're just like, yo, we got to get him out. We can't, we can't sit here, all day the safety of people around. Like we have security guards that are there. Like it's just so much of a safety issue. So we get him out again. We're able to talk him out again. And, all of a sudden, as we're not escalating it, we're not, pulling out, AFs or tasers or anything just yet. But the moment that we realize this dude he's going to fight, because he just, all he did was swing at us the whole time as we're trying to get him out. We finally got him out, and you just see a blank stare and his fist ball. And all of a sudden you just see him swing and hit my partner square in the face. And at that point, and this is a big dude, like this dude had to be 230 pounds, all muscle, straight muscle. If it was just me and him, he probably would have knocked me out. But the fact that he did that, I had my taser, and I had to put him. I locked him up, and he went down. But just based off of the information that we received by the way he acts, and we call it in the police world pre-assault indicators. And what that means is blading the body, or clenching fists, or 1,000-yard stare. This is all like going into, how we're going to handle the situation. And we never, there's very few situations where we start high. We start, our mouths are the most powerful weapon. And I can tell you, I've used my mouth to talk people into handcuffs more than I've used any of the tools on my belt. So I'm a strong believer in that. And that's why a lot of people think that I could be too patient. But and I'll give you the one of the, like a quote unquote ultimate situation where I've had to draw my firearm. It was a domestic dispute, and there's a lady saying that her ex is threatening her, and that was all that came out. Her ex was threatening her. There was no like physical contact or anything like that. So I show up, it's pitch black outside. So I'm already like, oh man, I already don't feel right. But the lady runs up to my window, like, hey, come to the back of the apartment complex, where I guess it was her daughter or sister that was calling us to tell us what happened with the ex. So I wait a couple seconds. Something told me to wait a couple seconds for my partner, and my partner shows up right on time. And he's also a good Spanish speaker. I'm not. I'm terrible. I'll get to how are you, and then that's it. So, but my partner, he knows Spanish like very well, or well enough to get a story. So we go back in the apartment complex to the back, and there's like a backyard that connects to the apartment, which was pretty nice space. So there's a backyard with a fence. So the moment you enter the fence, you can't see the outside. You're still outside, but you can't see the field that's behind it. So my partner walks up to the back door of the apartment, and I stay in the fenced off space towards the back, because I just don't feel right. And as they're talking, and I'm just sitting there, just making sure I watch the entry to the backyard and my partner to make sure he's okay. I see a guy walk right past me. He didn't see me at all, and he's clenching something. And I'm like, yo, like automatically my hairs are popping up, and I'm like, this is not like this. Like this is there's something wrong. So the moment I told him to stop. He doesn't stop the first time. And I see something clenched in his hand. So automatically I'm like, this is not good. So I draw my weapon at him, and all of a sudden he looks at me, and he didn't know I was there. He's surprised. He had a 13-inch knife, and he was sneaking up behind my partner and the ex-girlfriend, and he threw it, and I was able to get him down and, you know, arrest him. But just the how things can go from 0 to 100 real quick, and you know, I have to, like, that split second decision. Those are the type of things that, you know, we deal with on a daily basis. But it's all circumstantial. Like, I can give you, you know, stories for days that, you know, officers have dealt with. But I think that looking at somebody and their skin color isn't fair. What some people, officers, would be like that. I'm afraid of that, as we've seen in the past. The fair understanding. When you don't understand something, you fear it. But understanding the mannerisms of somebody, understanding the way they act, what they're doing. This guy had something clenched. He was hiding it behind his leg. So all of these things, I'm not looking at this guy's skin color, and I didn't say this guy's skin color. All I'm looking at is the body language. I'm reading the body language, and thank God I was there, because he saw my partner. It's police biggest day on my partner's back. What was he about to do with that knife? He was walking behind my partner as he was talking to his ex-girlfriend. What was he going to do with that knife if I wasn't there? Because clearly he had no regard for that, because he saw him. So that's, you know, and I think that's where it differentiates, because I think there's a fear of not understanding the community you're serving, and that's where I'm scared for my life. But then there's situations like this where officers, black, white, whatever, are dealing with these type of situations, and we're looking at the body language of somebody. We don't care what they look like. We don't care. We don't care about any of that. What we care about is the safety of the victim in the situation, and also the way people are responding to us, and how I was telling you about the pre-assault indicators and what people do before they're about to take off, like before they're about to rumble. And it's been studied, and that's why, you know, it's what's trained to in the police academies and things like that. But I'll reel it back in, it's all about the pre-assault indicators, not what the person looks like. And I think people are misconstruing what somebody looks like as fear instead of what they're doing.
Yeah, no, that puts me at a loss for words, just because, first and foremost, I'm glad you and everyone else was safe, but, you know, just realizing the danger that, like you said, can come at a moment's notice or no notice, and you just have to react to the situation. And I like what you said. Not once did you mention the guy's skin color, nationality, anything like that. It was the situation at hand. And I think that's what gets lost a lot. You know, a lot of times officers, because they don't know the people in the community that they're interacting with, or they're not in tune with the culture, that all they can do is, you know, dial into whatever preconceived notions they have.
Yep.
And that's where a lot of issues come from. Like, you know, I explain to people all the time, you know, they'll mention, like, I have my Wharton sticker and license plate frame. Like, it's like, yeah, it's cool. I like to celebrate the school that I went to, but I almost feel like that might be key in my survival. Just when I get pulled over and he approaches my window, it's unfortunate that this is the case, but maybe I'm viewed as less of a threat. But it's knowing that 9 times out of 10, you know, he's going to look at what I look like more so than what I'm doing or what I did. Because a lot of times the end result in a lot of these encounters don't quite match what a person was doing at the time these things happen, or what they did for the police even to be called there in the first place. So I think you hit that story in itself, man. That's powerful. Can you also touch on, you know, your response to when people say pick a side? Which side are you on?
Let's talk about slavery. Let's talk about slave catchers and what their primary job was. One of their primary jobs in the colonies was to protect the colonies, but also to make sure that the enslaved Africans did not escape. And if they did, they had hell to pay, right? They captured them, but they also killed them, right? They dismantled them, dismembered them, right? They did that to teach the enslaved Africans at the time a lesson. It was symbolic, right? And these slave catchers were typically from the lower echelon of the European, the Scottish, the Irish. They were the ones that's trying to solidify themselves as that elite group. But nonetheless, they was better than us because we wasn't even considered humans at the time.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? So with that being said, this went on throughout slavery. And then during the Reconstruction, when we were so-called released, right? They still continue that through black codes, which slavery never ended, because in the 13th Amendment, you do know that in it says, unless you are pretty much incarcerated,
right?
All right, we should all know that. Go on Netflix if you don't do that, right? So with that being said, this slave catchers, at some point as time went on, evolved into what? A municipality, right? And if you think that I'm not telling the truth, or you're not sure, if you look at some of the culture that the police department has with regards to Irish, that Scottish culture, the bagpipes, right? The paddy wagon, which is an insulting term to Irish people. That's why we call it the paddy wagon, because the Irish have that on lockdown. You got me? The fire department was kind of constructed and started by the Italians, and there's still some Italian culture that surrounds the fire department. So with that being said, things that have changed, it still remains the same. Protect and serve, right? Law and order. Be careful of those terms in which they are birthed from, right? War on drugs. Law and order. Anytime there was a mantra, right, or a political push, right, the law enforcement was the arm of that political push, was one of the arms of the political push. War on drug, right, sounded good, right, from the Bush era, even before that. It sounded good, but the end result did what? It landed a lot of black people incarcerated, right, for drugs that we know, right, that we did not bring into our community, our Ryan Council. Look it up, right? So there was a lot of things that was underhanded things that was done where the law enforcement was actually used to create this law, this law and order, war on drugs. You know what I'm saying? Those kind of pushes, political pushes, that use the police to enforce the law on the people. Now, when I say that, black people, right, historically have been oppressed by the police department, over police, militarizing police in our communities. I say our because I live and still live in the black community. So I'm going to answer this question real quick. What side do I choose? Right? The side that I'm on is who I am. I'm black. I speak from a black perspective because that's who I am. What I do as a police officer, I hear some police officers say, I'm black before I put this, this uniform on. When I take it off, I'm black. What's the in between?
Right.
What's the in between? When you pose that question, you got to answer that question, black man. Who are you when you put the uniform on? And you got to be careful that you don't subscribe to a Blue Matters mantra. Why do I say that? When you subscribe to that, that's just the construct, right? Because it was brought upon or conflict with Black Lives Matter, right? We know police officers matter. We know that. We see what police officers have done historically when they assault unarmed Black people and how they get off. And I'm going to tell you a story about Robert Garner. My godfather, my uncle in New York, was a police officer. They never taught the chokehold. It was illegal at the time in which he did that. How I know? Because when I sat and talked to my godfather a few years ago, he told me he was contacted and was asked, could he testify to that? My godfather trained that man. He never trained him how to do the chokehold because it was outside of their policy. Okay? So now the question is, right? Here I am as a Black man, right, doing this job. And here it is as a white officer. And the reason why I won't subscribe to Blue Lives Matter is this. If I have a white officer, right, who's my partner, and I am Black, but he goes against the community in which I came from, which could very well be my family, is my family, then why would I subscribe to Blue Lives Matter if mine doesn't matter? Because at least he will give me and my community the benefit of the doubt because of me.
Right.
You understand? I work with you. And the first thing they say is, I fear for my life. I fear for my life, right? Now, we can go on and on about looking at the videos and seeing, what does fear for my life mean?
Right.
Are you saying that? Do you really fear for your life? Or is that just something that you say that you got in your back pocket? If by chance you choose to hurt somebody, and that's my card, that's my get out card. I fear for my life, because I do know something that's on the books is that in policy, that stands your ground not only stands for like citizens, but definitely for police officers too. And you know that because there's officers that's been getting off on that same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see that as a Black man in this uniform, you got to understand you have a responsibility to not choose a side, but to be who you are. And if anybody within that blue curtain have a problem with that, then that's somebody you should not deal with. Okay? Because if you look at it, it's not so much as black and white. It is black and white, don't get me wrong. But if you close your eyes, it's about humanity. And if I can't tell you that what you did was wrong to another human being, and all you see is a Black animal that you needed to be put down, then brother, you might as well put me down too. Because I felt what that brother went through. Because as a young man and what I went through in Bensonhurst, and then it didn't stop there. I've been harassed by police officers before I was a police officer, and still to this day, I had stories where I have been harassed by police officers. I know what harassment looks like, and I know the face of it as well. And do you mean to tell me that you cannot sit here and tell me, and if you ask a whole room full of people, Black, white, Asian, what does the face of police brutality looks like? What would they tell you? What would they tell you? I would suggest to you that they would tell you that the face of police brutality is that of a white man because of what we see and what we go through. I don't have to look at the media to tell me, right, that this is wrong because I experience it. Everybody here comes in here with a different perspective. I lived it. A white person can sit there, they can sympathize, but they can't wear my shoes. They can't empathize. They never can. And that's okay. So I'm not sure if we can change the minds of individuals that choose to treat one group of people different than the other. Policing and community are very different when it comes to policing white communities and Black communities. What do I mean by that? When we are policing Black communities, it's usually because there's someone fucked up or messed up. I'm sorry. The department messed up between us and the community, right? And we got to make it right. So what we do, we come up with these ideas. And I'm not saying like these things are wrong, but I'm very skeptical about these things. We keep doing, events basketball, feeding the community, giving out clothes. You know what I'm saying? Sitting with those leaders in the community and figure out how ways in which, we can have the black kids trust the police department all over again. And sometimes I'm like thinking to myself, they never did trust us. You know what I'm saying? But okay, we have to go out to the community and gain their trust again. And then what happens? You go back out into that community, and guess what? We answer at its worst situation. And now we're back to square one. And so it's a revolving thing that we keep doing. It's like a house is on fire and we're getting buckets of water and pouring it on. Well, that's not going to put the fire out. That's kind of what we do at times. And I can say this because I'm a community relations officer for many, many years. First in the black community, and for the past 2-3 years in the white community. Now let's talk about that. In the white community, typically what happens is that when we do events with the white community, it's usually because they already got everything together. They already got their fair together. They already got the events together. So we're just there. Just so we can just be there, just so they can say, we support you, officer, in everything that you do. You don't deserve to go through what you go through. Blue lives matter, right? My response is, well, if blue lives matter, then the white officer that wears the uniform that's supposed to protect and serve the community, he wouldn't have shot the unarmed black man, right? Causing me hell from now my community that don't like me because of what he did. Just like my son said. They don't like me, and that hurts because I always gave back to my community. And then when I have, like some of them now, they don't look at me. You know what I'm saying? And it's not that they want to hurt me. They just can't do that because in the hood, you can't go up to police like that. You know what I'm saying? Just on the strength. You can't do that. You can't be seen with police like that. You understand what I'm saying? Right. And I get that. I understand that. But under these circumstances, who I am, I've been in places where this dudes on the street couldn't go. And I'm in full uniform and it's shut down and people give me love. May not be everybody, but they know what it is. Now I can't do that. But I know what it is because of this guy treat my people wrong, but because I'm wearing the uniform, I'm getting judged by it. You understand what I'm saying? So with that, what I said, with the white community, it's all gravy, right? But here's the other thing. Why is the sentiments of the white community different from the black community, right? We do know it's different, right?
100%.
Because we're not going upside their head. We're not shooting them unarmed. It's not on video. Where's the videos at? All these things are not happening in the white community as it's happening in the black community. So they're safe. They can say thank you for your service. Why are those people treating you different? You know what I'm saying? We love you. Yeah, because we're not shooting you. We're not hurting you. We're not harming you. We're not disenfranchising. We're not marginalizing you. We don't have a historical history that says I hate you. You understand what I'm saying? You're not reminded by those things when you see the patrol wagon or the paddy wagon come up the block. We are reminded that at times police departments can be looked at and viewed as terrorists in certain communities and not other communities. You understand what I'm saying? And I want to speak on what my son said about ripping and run up the street. I did, man. 22nd District, my first year, we had the first homicide, January 1st, man blown his head off. From that moment on, little nephew, Mo, I was thinking to myself, what did I get myself into? You know, I'm rolling up on scenes, seeing this dude or these guys' head blown off. And it started one after the other to the point at the end of the year, we had the most homicides. I worked with the captain directly to catch people that was committing homicides to stealing the bag of chips, committing robberies to stealing from the CVS. That was my job. And then I worked my way into narcotics in the same neighborhood that people look like me. But not only that, I went to school in that neighborhood, 13th and Susquehanna. And I had to patrol the area in which people that I went to school with still was out there. But I still got love. All I'm still my Facebook friends, so I must be doing something right. You know what I'm saying? So I had to deal with all of that, trying to find a balance. You understand what I'm saying? And you got to understand what the black community is going through after locking up so many different people. I was good too, man. That was a time when I was chasing cars so they can crash. You know what I'm saying? Stolen cars. You know, kicking in doors. Those are stories Maurice heard. You know what I'm saying? I love telling it. Because a lot of his friends and all that, they was looking at it like, damn, this is a real TV show. You a real TV show. You're a real TV show, Pop. You understand what I'm saying? You know, just to get the crowd and everybody, just to build that relationship. Those are things I used to have to do, man. I got my hands dirty, man. I did it real, so no cop can tell me nothing. I was out there. Because you might have a cop say, man, you don't know what it's like. Yes, I do. I was out there. I was chasing guys that was doing bad stuff, some of the same stuff that I was doing. You understand what I'm saying? So I had that relationship, but at the same time, it was a conflict. The biggest conflict I had was arresting young people that looked like me that I knew I could mentor. I would lock them up and then try to get them to get their degrees, try to get their diplomas, GEDs, work. I did that. That was me, but it was a conflict, so I had to leave. I had to make a decision. I said, you know what? I'm tired of this. When Fahim Childs got shot around 22nd and Lehigh, he was 10 years old. He was shot by a family member whom which I locked up years ago for a gun. He beat the case. I never forgot that because years later, him and his family had a shootout with another group of guys, broad daylight, while that young boy was being taken to school by his family member. He was the only one shot and killed in his head. Right? Meanwhile, Fahim Childs, I'll never forget it. At that point, I had to make a change because it was helping that young man, but also trying to see what was going on with our people. Why are we so hate? Why do we have so much this? It's not even, it's just this, you know what I'm saying? So it was like, what is causing this? Because we are a beautiful people. We are really a loving people. If you know your history, go in your history. Maurice, you want to talk about Sir Peel over there in the 1800s when he started? He's the father of community policing. That's a great thing to say. He was the father of community policing, right? And we still say today, some supervisors actually, when they're doing their boards, they actually use him, right? In their boards and their speech or their lectures, just as like, oh man, I got him now. This is definitely gonna get me promoted. Sir Robert Peel. Well, this man, right, when he created the Metropolitan Police over over there in Europe, in British, that was in the 1800s. What was going on in the 1800s? Slavery. So community policing, if you think of it from a historical sense, community policing from its onset, from the birth of it, from this guy, wasn't meant for us in the first place. You understand what I'm saying? I understand it evolved, but we got to look at the historical points to that and how that thing kind of, I just told you, Maurice, a police officer, his son might be a police officer, and it just keeps going on and on. These white officers, right? These particular white officers that's doing that, I stopped saying cop. I call them like it is. I wouldn't even call them officers. They brutes, right? Right? They're animals. They're animals. How about that? They're savages. To do something like that to a person, a human being, you're a savage. You're racist. You understand what I'm saying? That's white supremacy right there, right? White supremacy means to keep down and oppress. What are they doing? Keeping down and oppressive people.
Right.
Or people that's already oppressed in so many different areas. I'm going to leave you with this. In our community, in the Black community, right, we have, throughout years, have been trying to catch up, right? And what I mean by that, the way in which this America has been built, right? We built it hands and like blood, sweat, and tears, but we wasn't a part of the construction of it, the infrastructure of it. If you look at the Constitution, we wasn't a part of that.
Right.
4th of July is about to come up. I'm not celebrating that because 1776, I remember my ancestor was still in slavery until 1865.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? Don't get mad if I don't celebrate, or if somebody say happy 4th of July and I don't say nothing back to you, or I'm just scratching my head like, yeah, my people wasn't free that time.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? But if you look at this, with all that we had to go through, the Reconstruction era, you know, the Jim Crow era, civil rights, right? And all these other like things that we had to go through, right? Well, what does that, that's all over with. No, it's not. It's just shaped different. Colonialism, you know, is the taking of a land, right, from the indigenous people by any means necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But what is gentrification? Just another pretty word.
Yep.
Same thing. Because guess what? I don't have a problem with economic development. You know what I'm saying? I don't have a problem with that. Making things look pretty, but make it pretty for everybody.
Right.
Don't come into a neighborhood that was once a race of people, and now you don't see us there. But everything else is pretty.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to do redlining, and then predatory lending, right? And all these other things that go on that we know is white supremacy. Now, yeah, we got a LeBron James, we got a Michael Jackson. You understand what I'm saying? But the problem with us at times, we always say, why don't we get along? Unity is not first. It's consciousness, knowing what's going on. Just because he made it, right? And that black person made it to the top. If you ask him, he was told when he was young, you got to work 10 times harder than the what? The white man.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I have to tell my son that? Why do I have to tell my son as a rower, you got to be 10 times better than that white rower? Why is that? What race are we racing, man? It's not against them, because it seems like the narrative that they always ahead of. We're racing against each other, and that's why we're pulling each other down psychologically. PTSD, post-traumatic syndrome, right? No, how about post-traumatic slave syndrome? When we were released from slavery, right? Psychologically, think about that. We only know what we know and what we've been taught, right? And what we've been forced upon us. Do some studying, young people, about enslaved Africans and what we did. We actually had plenty of rebellions. They won't teach you about the rebellions that we had other than Nat Turner. There was plenty of rebellions. We fought back. You understand what I'm saying? But we still, as a people, are going through the psychological piece, right? That we never got help. When have you ever heard that we got help psychologically? Never got hurt. And there's residual effects to that, right? Just like I said, Maurice is a police officer. He's a police officer because he saw something in me. His son might see something in him, right? But check this out. If I was beating my son's ass every day, guess what? He might be beating his son's ass too.
Mm-hmm.
And so on. That's psychology, right? Deal with the psychology of it. I'm not talking about one person, black person that made it. I'm talking about all of us. We have to be conscious before we are unified.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to check out part 2 of this episode wherever you listen to podcasts.